Hi, everyone. This is the Perspective with Viv podcast. My name is Viv, and welcome to the show. Today's title is Love After Religion, Spiritual Awakening, Sacred Sex, and Starting Over. And I have my guests with me, Britton and Carolee Beckham. Britton and Carolee were raised in the strict dogma of the Mormon Church, and with infidelity threatening their marriage and family, found themselves at a cliff's edge. Through a deep commitment to heal, these two left everything they knew to find themselves. Over a period of 5 years, they rebooted their relationship and traveled the world, seeking their truth with 4 kids in tow. They have emerged on the other side as an embodied and awakened couple with a powerful message to share, and I cannot wait to share them with you. So hi Britton, hi Carolee, how are you guys today?
Hi, Viv. Thanks for having us
Yeah,
on.
hi. Thanks so much.
It's my pleasure. I'm so excited. You're the first couple that I've had on my podcast, so this is new
Oh,
for
great.
me. So let's see how it goes, okay?
Cool.
Yeah.
So my first question for you both, how did life inside the Mormon Church shape your identity, your marriage, and your understanding of love and duty?
So
It's a good question.
essentially, it shaped it from the very beginning, of like we were both born into it. And so our paradigm of like what a relationship is, what a marriage is, and what a successful family life would look like was all shaped by the Mormon doctrine and the Mormon culture. And that essentially looked like, you know, being, raising up in the church, going on a church mission at a certain age, and then coming home and marrying, shortly after that in the early 20s. And then it would also look like, raising our children in the church, essentially getting them baptized at age 8, having them also go on missions. And then when they get married off in a temple, like the Mormon temple, um, then we would also go and serve our own like mission as an elder couple. So there was a lot of like life was planned out for you. There's a sort of cultural approach to how like a good Mormon will live their life. And we sort of just assumed that paradigm for the most part as good members of the Mormon Church.
Yeah, I would also add it's a very patriarchal religion, and so a lot of like gender roles were pretty, like the growing up, there was a lot of kind of judgment that was encoded into my being about women who worked outside of the home, or there was a lot of programming to be like a wife and a mother, and to have those standard roles of like being the trad wife and taking care of the home, and then marrying a man that would be the quintessential provider. So we had a lot of that was part of the way we were raised too.
Thank you for answering that question. So would you say that that's what success looked like in terms of partnership in that lifestyle?
Yeah. So the dogma of the church is like marriage is the ultimate like point of it, and marriage within the temple of God is like the essentially the maximum you can achieve in this life together. And so if you can get through a successful marriage, well, even just staying together would be successful in the church's eyes. And so that's what really drove us. What was the question again?
Yeah, success.
Success. Yeah, that was it. That was really what drove the point of success in our marriage. So it doesn't really approach like the true joy of, they just say, oh, this is where you're going to find the greatest joy. But it most people aren't finding that greatest joy in that approach because they're not actually living for themselves. And this is what we learned obviously later, but living in the church, we got a firsthand view and an experience of like doing it the church's way and how it was not actually giving us the joy and success we truly
Yeah,
desire.
we actually did all of these things, right? Both Britton and I, when we were in our early 20s, we served individual missions for the church. We got married. We met at church. We got married in the Mormon temple, the main one in Salt Lake. We started having children. Like we really, by the definition of success, did everything right, which was a bit of a shock to my system when the impact of infidelity in our relationship and how that played out, like it didn't make sense. I literally was like, I did everything right and everything's awful.
Wow.
So it really challenged what that rightness really was and what it could be. And yeah, it was a big part of the program and a big part of what we had to break free from.
Thank you for that. So when did you begin to question the faith and structure you'd built your lives around?
Well, it really kind of actually, one of the main things that started it was the infidelity, because here we had been very active in the community, sending our oldest child to a very private religious school. So even further, like it went beyond just church on Sunday and our neighborhood. It was like our school community, everything was this. And then when infidelity threatened our marriage and we both sat with that, we actually went the route of the church to heal. Which required like a council of 12 men to kind of sit down with both of us and give disciplinary action and a full year long like do's and don'ts of behavior for him. And we approached it from the perspective of what the church said would be the way to heal. And as we went through that, and came out the other side doing everything the way that they said to, it ended up being actually more traumatizing for me. And I realized it didn't release me from any of the pain. It intensified it. And it didn't help Britton get any clearer on what his struggles were. And it really caused us to like question everything, because we are very spiritual, very mystical, very like guided people. And we realized we were outsourcing our power, and that wasn't working for us. So it's like a slow process to deconstruct religion.
Yeah, and I would just add, as someone that did seek outside the marriage for fulfillment, what I realized was like the church's teachings and doctrine. I was feeling all the temptation to do this. Why I was reaching out to other women and like creating these little side emotional relationships, and like why was I doing that? And the church couldn't answer this question. They couldn't tell me why it was such a temptation. Oh, you're just not praying enough. You're not going to church enough. You're not actually focused on the Savior enough or whatever. And the truth was, none of that was actually part of why. And that was part of the journey of healing that we eventually started after we left. But it was like, this was a telltale sign. So, like, after my year long work with the church and like trying to repair my sins of infidelity, there was literally no difference in my desire to see when I saw another woman, like that little ego mind, that little thing, that voice in my head's like, oh, she's kind of cute or whatever. And it's like bothering me. So I just became stronger and stronger at suppressing that energy. And that's essentially how I claimed victory, but it wasn't true victory
Because you were suppressing. Wow.
because I was
So
suppressing.
profound. So what was it like to start releasing old beliefs while still parenting, partnering, and navigating everyday life?
It's a really good question.
Yeah. So first, the first thing, so this is like when we started leaving. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah,
Yeah.
when we're
So the
shedding
first,
everything you knew.
yeah, so it started with a psychedelic journey. I had been told by my brother to try psychedelics, and I was like, nah. And he's like, well, just read this book then. And it was the How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. And so I was like, okay, totally. And I think a couple of people had recommended it, so I jumped in, I read it, I was really impressed by it, and I was actually convinced that I needed to do a psychedelic journey. And so I told Carolee and I said, hey, would you read this book? And if you're interested, let's do a journey together. And she was like all in. So we did a journey and we had a guide, and it was really like a intentionally spiritual thing that we wanted to see what this stuff was all about.
Nice.
And basically the next day after this beautiful journey, which by the way, could be a whole episode of podcast by in itself, but like the very next day was Sunday, and it was time to go to church. And we had a prior commitment with grandma to be there. Otherwise, we kind of have already disinterested in attending. We were going like once a month.
I mean, and
Mm.
obviously we were ready to do psychedelic mushrooms.
Yeah,
So.
obviously, since we had already started smoking a little bit of cannabis on occasion, and then now we were doing mushrooms and stuff. So we're like rebellious. And so we went, and it was in that meeting, like 15 minutes in, that we, under the influence still of the mushrooms, we were able to see the indoctrination patterns that were so alive in the church, and our kids were being subjected to it. And we just like were filled with total disgust at what was happening and what we were allowing to happen. So it was an easy walk away at that point. We just looked at each other and said, we're done. And we never looked back.
Wow.
But there was a lot of deconstruction too that needed to happen, right? And like we had early before that, and even, well, yeah, leading up to that journey, there was cognitive dissonance. a lot, like things where we were told one thing our whole life. And then as we began to heal and explore outside of the parameters that we were told we had to stay in, all of a sudden healing was coming. Like everything I was told would be wrong, they were wrong about. So yeah, like we were really primed for that journey.
Yeah, and I would say just like, as we shed the layers, what really happened is we were immediately guided into a way to re-educate ourselves emotionally. And Carolee was a big part of that. She attended a year-long like training course around processing your emotions and learning the techniques around it. And that was really powerful for our relationship, for our family and everything as we brought that intelligence in. And so that became like the focus of how we began healing is this certification that she did. And then we just kept diving into new books and new literature, and all of that was just adding to our paradigm. So we began shedding layers really quickly of like how we looked at God and our relationship to Satan, and all of these concepts that we were trying to deconstruct from Mormonism. And we of course knew like our children were struggling with a lot of the trauma that we carried into our relationship, and that we had already passed it down to them. And so but here was the kind of funny part was we actually had to really focus in on ourselves first and heal the relationship and heal our own individual selves before we could drop into the children. And so that
Exactly.
actually, in a way, it wasn't neglect, but it was just we just didn't have as much time to honor our children and be present with them while we were trying to heal. And so the first like couple years of our journey, about 2.5 years of our journey of healing, was focused almost entirely on our relationship.
I think that that's so beautiful. It's a beautiful journey and story that you shared with me because in order to heal, you have to go within and you have to take that time for yourselves first before you can even give of yourself to your children. So that was being caring, that was being considerate because you're thinking about the larger picture. We need this time for ourselves to heal before we can be better parents to you guys. We have to be better versions of ourselves to each other, but to ourselves most especially. And one thing that I'm thinking about, or the thing that comes to question now is, where was that moment where you were able to both forgive the situation, especially for Carolee? What was it like? Like, where did it reach that point where you're like, I can forgive him for this infidelity. I can move on. Because, sometimes, I guess maybe because of the structure that you were raised in, you didn't really think, oh, divorce. What made you say, I'm going to stay, I'm going to work on this, I'm going to forgive this, and we're going to transcend it?
A really good question. There's two answers to that. One of the first answer is to the question, what made me stay instead of go? And, as we were deconstructing our faith, we called in a lot of new ways to re-educate ourselves. And one of the things that I did was I basically shut down the idea completely of listening to spiritual texts from the masculine voice. And I stepped really deeply into the feminine because in this religion that I was raised in, everyone with authority was male. And I had heard the voice of God through that male context. And I was like, nope, not doing that anymore. And so I jumped into the path of the rose, the red thread lineage, the found Mary Magdalene, and that really resonated, especially with my background and what I had gained from Mormonism was a really good foundation to the minute I heard about Mary Magdalene and who she really is. All of a sudden, it was like, oh, that's truth. That really landed. And I was reading a book by a woman who shared her own story of her own journey as the heroine of her story, and she talked about like King Arthurian legends because my ancestry is Celtic, and we have a lot from those Northern Isles, and so I really gravitated in my healing towards my spiritual lineage, which was from those isles, and this book was written with that in mind. And she told a story about essentially about sovereignty, about how what women really want most is this concept of sovereignty, this empowerment, this freedom and love, and Ireland, the name Ireland comes from the Celtic goddess Ieru, and she is this goddess of sovereignty. Sovereignty is a woman, and the king gets to marry sovereignty, and that's what makes him a king. And so I found all of this mythology and these stories and realized that I had the potential in my own life to be on this path of finding what sovereignty really felt like. And so I committed to healing myself. And I knew that I needed to do that whether or not we stayed together. But he also, was willing to stay with me and be my companion and do the same work for him. And so I thought, if I have a man who, while has hurt me incredibly, also is willing to stay with me as we heal, as he heals and as I heal, and that we can step through this threshold into sovereignty where both of us feel safe and grounded and rooted in that ideal was what I really wanted. We were very, very far from it, but I had this vision that it was possible and that it could be possible with him. And so that's what kind of helped anchor me into staying, the potentiality of what healing could be like on the other side. But I felt very, very far from it. And I guess, the other question you had is like, when did I become grateful for these wounds? Because I really worked hard. I had PTSD. I had betrayal trauma. Like, I was triggered so much of the time, even when things were good between us. Like, the past was really present in my somatic body and in my experience. And I had a hard time trusting him. And I had a hard time trusting community. And I had a hard time trusting women. I had a deep sister wound because some of the women that had over the years been interacting with him professed to also be my friends, and they weren't, so I had all of these wounds. And the piece that actually helped me finally go, oh. And I think you'll get this more than maybe others would who don't speak astrology. It was through astrological understanding of my blueprint. My Venus is conjunct my Chiron in the 11th house of community.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
And so when I learned about my astrological blueprint, when I began to understand that the exact idea of being betrayed, of having wounded love and wounded community was like literally written and coded into like what I was here to transcend, because
Wow.
Chiron's the wounded
Your
healer.
wounded healer, yes.
Yeah. And so when I saw that, all of a sudden I was like, oh, okay.
Oh,
It
Like,
makes sense.
it makes sense. It makes sense that this was my wound, but the potential to be the healed version, the embodiment of I've been through this hell and I've come through the other side, and I love my story. And it was the key to my awakening and the key to actually healing generational trauma and the key to my own personal embodiment. I call my life as a Mormon, the life before my healing, almost like a past life in this life. But it's all like this one lifetime that gets to integrate all of my lifetimes, And so there's a very like esoteric, spiritual, astrological connection. But it took a while for me to begin to understand those pieces. But once I put all of that together, it really helped me shift out of victim mentality and into like solid empowerment.
sovereign. Wow, beautiful answer. Thank you so much for that. Honestly, so many layers, but we have so many more questions. I would have gone into it deeper, but thank you because I needed to hear that. But I also love what you said about self-sovereignty, because when women actually attain that and achieve that, it changes things. And I think what I'm admiring about you both stories, the fact that you both made that commitment to heal together. And the story is so inspiring. Like, I'm so excited to be having this conversation because I can't even imagine how my listeners would feel when they hear it. I'm already feeling transformed. I'm like, oh my goodness, there's so much more that we can explore. So let me move on to my next question.
Okay.
What were some of the earliest truths you discovered about yourselves once you started the inner work?
Such a good question. Yeah. So one of the truths that I had to come to the realization about was all of the guilt that I had. So as a Mormon, you're not supposed to have any sexual interaction of any kind before marriage, but I didn't really follow that very good. So I had a lot of guilt-laden experiences with like um, women that basically I loved being sexual. I loved, kissing, making out, touching, all the things. And all of it ended with this feeling of like, oh, you're bad because you're not doing what God wants you to do. And now you're filthy before God. And now you can't approach God. Like all of that guilt, right? And so the truth I had to confront within is like, is there truly any guilt around any of this? And that led me to the realization, or to the question of like, am I overly sexual? Am I broken? Is there something wrong with me? Is that why I want all these women? Like, and what I realized about myself, and again, some of the stuff in my own birth chart when Carolee showed it to me kind of helped also make sense of this and confirm my
Mm,
own understanding and inner truth. But it was like, am I
nice.
overly sexual? And so um that was a hard one. And then I realized the answer was no, and that it's just my soul desire. And then I had to ask the question of like, well, will this marriage work out if I want to have my sovereignty and still be connected to Carolee, still be married to her, but also have like a more expanded approach to
Ooh.
sexual interaction outside the marriage? So that was that was a real difficult one to lay on her, and see how that fit, because I knew it was going to be like almost triggering. Well, it was
It
triggering
did. It triggered.
and
Yes,
inducing
ma'am.
of the trauma PTSD that she had. And but I had to approach that truth because it was my truth. It was it was the thing that needed to be said. It was like, I can't walk away. Like I kept going into my mind and being like, can I walk away? Can I just turn off all connection to other women completely? And the answer just kept coming back that that would be more suppression and that it wouldn't work. So I had to face it, and that was really hard.
Wow. Thank you
And
for
I would
sharing
add,
that.
you know, that really was hard. But you know, jumping forward into present day, we've actually been able. We have a very like co-creative, balanced agreement, safe, secure relationship, and neither one of us are compromising our core
Mm,
identity at all. Which that piece right there. Earlier on in our healing, we felt both of us felt like, oh, we'd have to make compromises. We'd have to let go of who we are in order to be stay with each other. And so I just want to say like super props to us back then for sticking with it and trying to figure it out without calling it quits. But also like some people really just need to split and not be together. So we hold no judgment if someone in their relationship needs to go separate ways. You know, I'm just grateful that we're now in a place where like there is no more trauma, there's complete trust and safety. Like I don't actually have any more PTSD. Like it's been the work we've done has really rooted out that experience and birthed us into this new divine union that's like you super yummy, super juicy.
Mm-hmm.
no, it feels
Um,
super
but
yummy.
yeah. But what did you say? Sorry.
What do
I
we
said
mean
it
by
feels
yummy?
super yummy. Like the
Oh,
whole
it
Yeah,
feels
okay.
super
dynamic, your
yummy.
dynamic feels yummy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I'll just add, you know, one of the core beliefs that I found out about myself as we began to do this work is I realized one of the things that was blocking me from my desire and from my embodiment. See, like I mentioned earlier, I was really deeply programmed to be a wife and a mother and never really anything to be a lover. I was a virgin when we got married. I had some sexual trauma from my childhood, and I had a lot of shame and guilt and yuckiness about my body most of my life. This was also one
Mm.
of my wounds. And so I really wanted to be this embodied lover, but it was something that actually I literally just couldn't access. I had to do deep inner work and healing to shed those layers of conditioning and release the trauma from my system before I could really access who I truly am. And one of the first beliefs, you know, it's like it's these moments of radical truth that really set us free. And we get scared to maybe say the true thing, share the judgment that feels severe. And these judgments come up and we're like, oof. And one of the judgments that came up for me was that I thought embodied women were trashy. And I could see that from experiences in my childhood, from people that I knew, and how all of it was portrayed. And when I identified that belief and was able to express it to Britton, I then called in a new experience to see women that were embodied and allow myself to view them not from this old judgmental vision, but like from the idea of, ooh, let me witness an embodied woman and view her as a goddess. view her as divinely connected to source, not trashy, not dirty, but like whole and clean and pure and beautiful. And so I was able to actually have that experience to help me rewrite that belief. But it was pretty scary. It took me the minute I discovered it, it still took me like at least half an hour to have the courage to even put it into words, because it felt like it was a big one for me.
Oh, wow. I love that answer. Thank you. So, how did you begin to explore sexuality in a way you hadn't before?
So that was because of me. With her Venus in Taurus, that's like the sign of
Very
monogamy, and she
sensual.
really wanted that stability. But my Venus is in Aquarius, and it's not the same thing. So I kept saying, like honoring my truth, I kept like nudging her, hey, can we, we had sort of been it wasn't just coming from me from this like, oh, I need this so bad, but it was like we had come across friends that were swinging and different types of community members that had been exploring their relationships opening up. So it wasn't like a big deal to me to like try it, with no strings attached. It was just like, hey, let's try this and see what happens. And so I kept nudging her, asking her, putting a lot of pressure in that way of just like, hey, I really, that wait, it's not something I can bypass anymore.
Well, and in some ways, he thought that by me allowing this freedom of expression with him in a safe container, safe, we didn't really understand fully safe, he thought it would help awaken my eroticism. It would help.
Well, I had tried literally everything before that. So it's just another one of those possibilities. I really was trying to awaken her eroticism. But my intention here was like, let's see what this can do in the marriage or in the relationship. And so we did. We in 2022, like basically about 2 full years into this healing journey, a little bit more, we finally got to the point where she was willing to. The universe kind of put pressure on her to do that. And so we did. We had a few experiences where we invited a man or a woman into the bedroom and had some fun. But these were really great for me, and they were traumatizing for her because she wasn't yet embodied enough to know how to even be in a situation like that. So that those layers began being peeled off. But what really helped us as we first experimented in this way, we actually had been calling in an opportunity to get sexually re-educated as well, because we had all of our Mormon programming. We didn't understand safety. We didn't understand yes and no. We just, it was just like, let's try this and then just jump in. What we did know was we wanted something intentional, but we were led to ISTA. I don't know if you've ever heard of ISTA.
No.
It's the International School of Temple Arts, and it's a program that is designed to integrate spirituality, shamanic work, and sexuality into a healing container. And so you're doing the inner work, and you're activating eros, and you're using ritual and shamanic work to like clear, to open, to activate all of that. And it's really beautiful. And we did that for a week. It felt like a month, and we had the biggest vibration change. We essentially came back from that feeling very sexually liberated. The energy was like, oh my God, I see how sexual energy is actually the life force. Sexual energy is actually what causes people to awaken deeply into their own authority. And we realized that like this is the reason why religion and other types of cultural things suppress this energy, try to attempt to control it, because it does free you. And when you're fully free in your sex, you can experience life without shame, guilt, or judgment for anyone else, because then you realize, oh, I can just explore my sex how I want. People can explore their life how they want. They can explore their sex how they want. I don't need to judge it. I don't need to sit there and decide if it's right or wrong. And that frees up so much energy within yourself, right? So that was how we sort of started to initiate the opening and then get the education we needed. And that was a huge vibration shift for us.
Nice. So, how did your sex life transform emotionally, energetically, and spiritually?
Up until this point, right? By the time we went and did this course, we had all 4 of our children, and so much of the conversation around sex, around intimacy in my programming from my upbringing, there were things that literally were said to me like, sex is for the man. Like your husband's going to need you to be able to be there for him because that's what men need. And, there, yeah, it was a completely different kind of experience and approach and perspective on it. But what truly was lacking for me was the permission to feel desire. There was still judgment about desire. There was judgment about eroticism. There's a lot of just judgment about this aspect of life, which really is so beautiful and a way to feel so connected to the divine. So in going to this in-person week-long healing retreat together as a couple, it really anchored us into a new way of looking at the very thing that we've been told through a lot of like high demand Christian theology. Sex is shame, sex is bad. Those are those who are the holiest are often celibate. The priests, the pope, like a lot of that, nuns, I mean, they take a vow of celibacy and that makes them holier. Jesus in main Christianity isn't even referred to as having been married. Like he was holy because of his celibacy, like
His mom didn't even have sex to have it.
yeah, she was,
Like, come on.
yeah, like it's this story that's
It's
telling us,
ridiculous.
and what we discovered was, by liberating this, the very thing that we were told makes us sinners. Even Adam and Eve, the story of the Garden of Eden, and the original sin was, essentially sex, essentially intimacy. And what if we radically challenge every narrative that tells us that's bad? This is what you need to be protected against, and allow ourselves to step into it with the perspective of where's the divinity, where's the divine in this. And so it's like now we live in this space where the intersection of spirituality and sexuality are one, where our union brings us closer to God and the goddess, where we are so open with one another that, I mean, some of the juicy parts, before I didn't even know I could squirt. Now it happens all the time.
Oh, wow.
Right? Like it's a completely different shift.
I love that for you.
My body is safe and my body is open and my body is free. And, our union is something that we anchor into on, if not a daily basis, like a daily basis. We're just very, very connected to the eros in our partnership, and that has made huge impacts on like our family life and life with our kids and how we hold the work that we do. Yeah, it's that's why I call it like a past life in this life, because it's so night and day different.
Yeah, and I would say, so for us, how it evolved is, for one, we just started feeling a lot more pleasure during sex. There was a connectedness, like as I did the work with her and we did the work together and for our own selves and for the relationship, we just found that when we went and wanted to make love, that it was just much more deeper. It was much more connected. It was much more pleasurable. And we started experimenting a little bit with using cannabis with it, which was incredible because it allowed us to tap into the energy waves of what's happening during intimacy. And so what we really became attuned to was each other's energy. And I remember early could feel each other's chakras, and we could like feel the waves in us a little bit differently during intimacy. And so one of the big breakthroughs during our intimacy was like we became energetically connected during sex. And I mean, we're always energetically connected now, but it's like during sex, it's like a new level. It's like incredible, right? So we can play with that energy. Like we don't even have to touch each other, and we're in like deep bliss. And so that the energetic, I think it's called energetic sex. It's like a known thing in the Tantra community. And this is what Tantra tries to teach, is like how to achieve these levels of connection. The other thing was she unlocked her own pleasure more, like she was able to squirt. I was able to penetrate her without pain. Like she had a lot of pain and discomfort in penetration, like if it was too deep or whatever. That was obviously an energetic guard around her own depth and seeing herself and being vulnerable. And as she evolved, all of that opened up, and now it's like I can't hit her deep enough, like it's just like give it to me more. So that's always fun. And then we unraveled another layer of like really getting sacred around our connection and finding a way to manifest and work with it. These waves of energy are so beautiful and orgasm is so potent. And what I learned through some of my research and study was that like you can use sex to manifest, and you can use sex to create, and you can use sex to heal. And so we started using it for these and setting intentions around our connection containers. And then finally, like when we were at ISTA, we were sort of introduced to things outside of traditional sexual connection, which is like the BDSM kink stuff. So we started to really explore, like we were introduced to it. It was fun. And since then we've explored it in a lot of different ways. And yeah, so like we've just sort of incorporating more and more as we keep going. And it's we're not done. I know we're not done exploring the depths of it, because it just seems like there's never ending possibilities around it. So yeah, it's really fun.
Beautiful answer. Thank you so much for going in depth, because that's exactly what I wanted. So, how do you work with rituals, cycles, or sex magic to sustain and deepen your connection? And can you talk more about manifesting with sex? Because that's something I'm so interested in.
Yeah.
Let me set some tone
Yeah,
on that.
please.
So when it comes to manifesting work, what we're actually doing is we're asking to adjust our vibration to a new timeline. And so what we do is we set an intention to tap into a new experience. For example, I want to manifest a better partner. I want to manifest a harmonious relationship with my child. I want to manifest, a house. In this case, we actually manifested the home we're in. Whatever that intention is, as soon as you do it with true intention, like real heartfelt intention, you're, and frankly, even if you don't, like if you just like, I wish I just had a this. Well, that's an egoic way of doing it. But if you come at it from a soul level and say, like, I know that I need like our home, our family, we desire to have like this type of home. We want it to be like this. This is why we really feel connected to that purpose from a soul level. Then what happens is you're immediately shifted onto a timeline to get that, to achieve that, and to experience it. And what is going to happen is the universe and its incredible intelligence is going to guide you through all of the shadow work that you need before you can actually experience that. So sometimes manifestation can happen quickly because we've already moved through the shadows. We just needed to call it in.
Oh,
Other manifestations can take a long time because there are cycles of work that need to be done in between. And before I hand it off to Carolee, because she's going to talk about like the ritual component of it, is that I want people like your audience to think about energy, everything being energy, and thinking in the form of waves and amplification and frequency. So when we amplify something, we actually create a stronger signal. And we are magnets, right? We have an electric field around us and a magnetic field around us generated by the heart and the brain. And that field is literally measurable, 6 feet out in every direction. And as we align within ourselves deeper and deeper by moving through shadows and stuff, what we're doing is we're actually creating a higher amplitude of signal to attract that experience, if that makes sense. So when we talk about how do we manifest deeper through sex, deeper through aligned intention, is we're just trying to achieve higher levels of frequency and amplitude. So we do that through aligning multiple things.
thank you for that.
And so, yeah, let's talk about the ritual part. Ritual came to us unexpected and really intuitively, and we didn't even really know what we were doing when we first started having ritual. And how this happened was, if we go back in time just a little bit to the rock bottom, the pain of the betrayals, the leaving religion, being ostracized and pushed out by our community. Like I had all these wounds that I was working through, and I was given a book. I was given a book by this beautiful woman who is now a sister-in-law. She ended up marrying my brother. We were just meant to be in each other's lives. But she gave me this book called Moon Bath. And I'm actually a Cancer rising, so I didn't know that at the time. But like it felt really fun. Oh, what's this book? Oh, it has the seasons and it has moon phases and it has tea blends that you can make to like pour in the bath, and you can like begin to take baths in alignment with the moon. Ooh, that sounds cool, And so I started doing this. And because I was now buying botanicals to make tea blends for my bath, all of a sudden I needed like really witchy jars and making my own apothecary. Like it just kind of started this ball rolling of like, well, I guess I'm a witch and I now have an apothecary and I work with the moon and I'm not really sure what all this means, but here's an altar and here's my jars and here's all my magical workings. And it just kind of started flowing intuitively while we were deep in the cauldron of our healing. And it started to get really fun for me. And Britton was like, that actually looks, I mean, I did this for about a year before I even knew anything really about astrology and astrological transits. And he started joining into these baths, and they were timed with the seasons and timed with the moon phases. And then I started to drop in through Instagram into various astrologers' work, and I would read what they would say. Oh, this, I mean, we literally just had the most beautiful new moon of the year yesterday, right?
Yeah.
But they would say, oh, this full moon, it's in this sign, and these are the themes, and da. And I started reading that, and I was like, because I wouldn't talk to anybody outside about what I was really going through. I had a lot of shame. I couldn't admit that my husband had been unfaithful. I couldn't admit the things that I was working through. They felt really scary, and my community wasn't safe to like hold it without judgment. But here I was finding these astrologers who were perfectly describing the very things that were happening in my inner landscape. And I was like, there is something to this. Like, what is going on? How can they know? They don't even know me. They're across the world. And so then that became this kind of astrological pulse, right? But our ritual really began because of the moon. And as a moon ruled goddess, like I can't like not connect with the moon. So the way we now really work and our approach, we call it ritual shadow work. It's because we use the current lunation. We understand where the moon is in the sky in any given period of time, especially specific moon phases. The new moon, the full moon, and the dark moon are three different phases that we work with very consciously. And now I take it even a step deeper into, well, how is it affecting me personally based on my astrological blueprint? How is it affecting him personally based on his astrological blueprint? When we work with clients, it's astrologically aligned ritual coaching, essentially. Let me look at your blueprint. Let's talk about how the moon is gently illuminating the shadow aspect of you, right? We all have shadows. Healing doesn't end. We don't need to heal from our healing. We just need to accept that we're still always going to be seeing parts of ourselves that are ready to be released. The world right now has had so much trauma, so much generational pain, so many beliefs that have been imposed upon us. And we're really in this collective awakening. But it's important to know how to like do the shadow work, do the healing work to like set ourselves free. And the moon is a beautiful illumination, very gentle, very kind. The moon rules our emotional space. So that's how we pull it all together.
Yeah, so you think about the moon is a waveform, right? From full to new. And then our intention creates a lot of alignment in waveform. And then you bring in the magic of sex, which is basically you're already raising your vibration when you're in that intimacy. And what you do, so the whole way sex magic works is we first set an intention. This is what we're going to be making love around. Okay. We do it on specifically like typically new moons or full moons because those are the times in which you can either create or release. So you can help heal through the releasing, you can help create through the new moon. So full moon and new moon. And we create ritual. So we're doing a very intentful, like sacred connection where we're setting candles. We might take 10 to 15 minutes to just set the room how we want it. We'll get the music right. We'll get the lighting right. We'll
take a bath.
And we usually precede it with some sort of bath to just ritually clean ourselves. We can sometimes do some work with saging and stuff, but we create this beautiful environment and then we make love. And like a lot of times through that, we can as orgasm is approaching or as it's happening, we can call out the actual desire. So like if it's we're calling in the thing that we desire, and really that actually amplifies the waveform so much that it brings the orgasm to happen for both people. And when that happens, it's basically a done deal. Like
Wow.
you've sealed this thing in as an energetically intended thing to happen. So it's a really conscious approach to creating, and it's really truly about the role of co-creatorship. And Carolee and I see ourselves as co-creators of our life. Like we're not just beings that are being tossed around like the waves on the waves, but we're really stepping into like, how do we read the astrology and work with it in a way that co-creates in alignment with the cosmic clock.
So beautiful. So many layers. For one, I'm a Cancer moon, so I'm very much in tune with the moon. I always like track the moon, new moons, full moons. I used to write astrology reports. So my connection to the moon is something. And then you bringing the moon cycles with rituals, with the act of sex, and then manifesting. It's like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to get your book. I have to get your book. That is crazy. I do have a question before I go on to my other questions. In this process of sex, after setting the whole environment, would you say that orgasm is what drives everything home? Like you're close to a climax and you picture what it is that you want, or you call out what it is that you want. And then that force, that energy is what is like the last push to just like bring it out.
Well, it definitely, it doesn't have to happen through orgasm.
Okay.
Okay, so that's something that's important. It's like it doesn't mean that both parties have to, or even either. But what is important is that you're continually aligned through the act, right? Like you think of the sexual connection in this act of manifesting is around manifesting a home. So you might say, like as you're making love, like I see us in this place, like I describe the home, describe how you feel. The most important thing is generating the feelings around what you want to experience. It's like you experience it now. And how much easier is it when you've created this beautiful environment where you're actually in bliss already? Like,
Yeah.
why not just tap into those feelings? So you're just creating the feelings. From a metaphysical standpoint, the envisioning of the thing is a masculine sending forth energy. You're actually creating the experience in the timeline. You're tapping into the timeline through the vision. Through the feeling of it, it's a negative polarity. It's the feminine aspect. You're pulling the experience, the energy back into you so that you can fully experience it. And when you do experience it in your body, you will experience it in manifestation and form.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
and so like even for me, I don't even track anymore when I come or when I don't come. Every time we come into these experiences, my body is tapped into so much bliss during the entirety of the experience that
Wow.
it's like, it just really builds. And like Britton said, we often, especially when we're in this container of a manifestation portal, we often speak to each other and talk about the very thing that we're manifesting in real time, while we're in our eros. And it's part of the conversation, it's part of the connection. We really feel it in our bodies together. And it really merges our own timeline. Like there's this other kind of magical component that we've discovered, that it's like 1 + 1 is 3, and the third aspect is that merging of the two into a new we identity, that is desirous to be in heart alignment, with that vision of the future. So
Okay. Thank you for that. So how do you apply this approach or the teachings in the book with couples that you work with? And can single people also use it?
yeah, so it's actually, you don't have to be partnered, and we work both with singles and with couples. The approach is very, yeah, we dive in,
The partnering actually just makes it a little bit more easy and effective when you're doing shadow work, because you have that live mirror, right? You're talking to somebody, they're holding space for you without judgment. And so it just adds a level of efficiency. And
Okay.
also with sexuality, but it doesn't require two people to do it.
Okay.
So, like you can do self-pleasuring techniques to do the same thing. And frankly, I have done that. She's done it. And like we've worked with our own energy in that way.
Yeah,
Okay.
but when we work with our clients and our friends and we help them understand these things, it's held in like your standard kind of coaching container, and we use the astrological blueprint of each individual and the current transits, and we pull all that information into our direct one-on-one coaching and help them understand through the questioning that the cosmos are directing, into their own inner world, right? When you sit down with a therapist, and therapy can be really, really profoundly impactful. I'm not saying it's not, but a lot of times the traditional therapy is just talking in circles, trying to get to the root, trying to get to the point. And instead of doing that, we can see what the moon is illuminating and use the moon to ask direct questions that get there really fast, that say, oh, this is what the moon's saying is going on in your life right now. How does that feel?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's always like, oh yeah. And then it's like, okay. And then this is what, we often, when we meet with our clients, we'll talk to them about, based on when our call is, it's like, well, what's the next moon? Okay. Last week's clients got in downloads, personalized downloads about this new moon that we had this week, and very specific instructions on ideas on how to do their own ritual and how to set their own energetic, emotional container with the cosmos, so that they could be in alignment with this beautiful lunation. If we do a session before a full moon, then we'll talk to them about the full moon and what it's inviting them into release. And so it's like the coaching is very real time, but it also dives into the heart and the root that taps into a lot of like past trauma. Everything we do is very trauma informed too, because of the level of trauma that we've experienced in our own life from the religion and from the, everything we've already mentioned today.
And I would just say too, like the sacred sexuality component of ritual shadow work is not like, it's not a basic component. It's not something we just introduce upon our clients immediately. They really have to attune themselves to this work first before they can just jump into that. Unless they've already had some practice in it, and we're just kind of opening the door further for them. So yeah, like I don't want to scare people that are like, oh, I'm not ready, like to jump into that. Like, I don't know how I could do, sexual magic, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Like we're not going to jump into that. We start with, building a relationship with the moon and tapping into the understanding of your own chart. And then we kind of build it from there and like let people, work with that slowly until they feel comfortable with like doing sexual work with this type of inner work or shadow work.
Okay, thank you for that. So, what shifts have you seen in the people that you've worked with?
Well, I would say the first thing is like you immediately see the moon activating real things for them. So I say the first thing that we see is like once they attune to it, and they don't even have to be attuned to it because the moon is actually affecting our psyche already, right? It's affecting the psyche of the whole planet. It's the fastest moving celestial object in our periphery, right, of the Earth. And so it is having a physical effect on the planet by moving the water around, the tides, but it also affects our psyche in a major way. And I think this is the thing that will come to science in a greater degree over the next like 10 or 20 years, is we'll find how these subtle energies truly affect the brain and the psyche. And so that would be the first thing, is just noticing how in tune we already are, but just not knowing that we're already being led. So when you come to the awareness that, hey, this is active for me because of this alignment in my own chart, then it's like really helping people to get behind the work in a way that feels like solid and has a foundation of truth.
And I'll add some of the biggest profound shifts we've seen in our work has been when we're able to explain the harsh aspects on someone's chart to them. And also like their own Chiron, placement, and just like my own awareness of, oh, wow, this is how this Chiron Venus conjunct in my 11th house in Taurus has actually played out and had this looping story, right? Some of us have harsher aspects in our charts. Some people have a little bit more of a harmonious chart. My chart was not, but like showing that aspect and like holding the shadow with love and awareness and like acceptance, has helped our clients, instead of like feeling like everything's so shitty in their life, all of a sudden they're like, oh, even the shit has had purpose. Like I'm being called into these depths, and I'm actually also being supported in what's difficult. We were in our journey, we had sold everything and we're traveling the world with our 4 kids for almost 2 solid years of like a deep soul pilgrimage. And in that, we were in Egypt for a couple of months. And during our Egypt time, Britton and I, like the first 3 weeks, it was just him and I. And we were being very like sacred spiritual pilgrims, part of like a container, traveling to a lot of the temples. And while we were floating on this traditional Egyptian boat called the Diabea on the Nile, I was talking to another woman who was in this journey with us. And she said she didn't really like the harsh aspects. Oh, I kind of want to avoid the harsh aspects of my chart. And even then I was like, but it's really through those challenges that we see how courageous and brave, and, it's like the Phoenix moment of everything burned down, but now what do I get to rise and become? And so one of my favorite things is actually helping somebody make sense of their pain through their astrological blueprint, and then seeing the liberation that comes through a conscious working with the moon, and how the moon helps us change our story and go from disempowered to fully empowered, from victim mode into everything's happening for me. That we've seen that shift, and actually that is a continual journey of integrating. But it happens really fast. The minute somebody that's pointed out and they're able to have this new perspective, and it's like Ram Dass says, I am loving awareness. Like bringing that awareness has been so transformative.
It's powerful, yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for that. So since we're coming to the end of the podcast, I have 2 more questions for you that we can answer briefly. Since you've left religion, what spiritual practices sustain you both now?
Pretty much everything we've been talking about. So ritual shadow work is our primary sustaining work because it continually drops us into healing and realignment with our destiny timeline. That's an important part. When you connect to the cosmic clock, you're not just doing the shadow work, you're actually aligning to your pre-incarnative plan of like, where is my destiny? And it will take you there. The other thing we do is we connect. We love just connecting with the land here. We're on an acreage out in the Colorado mountains, and just being connected to the land is a very spiritual practice. I do sound healing, so we work with sound, and we have altars all throughout our house. And so every day is just presence within the divine. Like we're just knowing that we're in flow, and we're really filling into each experience, whether that feels fearful, or whether there is a disconnect somewhere within our life, within one of our relationships. We're feeling into that from a spiritual perspective and just being present.
Thank you for that. My final question: what does embodiment mean to you both now?
What does embodiment mean? It's like, okay, here's what it means to me. We all have the highest embodiment of ourself. Like there's this highest self concept of all of our lifetimes, all of our pain, all of our story, all of our wisdom really coming to this point in this present life to be fully integrated. It's like calling in our highest version of self, the God or the goddess within, bringing that into presence and being able to radiate love, acceptance, non-judgment outward. Like it's the gospel of love, essentially. It's what we feel Jesus or Yeshua and Mary Magdalene were really trying to teach. It's that those codes of Christ consciousness, or just codes of divinity, codes of source, whatever it is for someone. Like the idea that we have this highest version of ourselves that loves every aspect of who we are. And so the embodiment for me is the integration of that, like the true calling it in and feeling that love for myself, that radiates from source, and then through my heart, through my yoni, through my body, through my expression, through my voice. Like it's all that that inner alignment with the destiny. Yeah.
Yeah, and just as a perspective that supplements but doesn't detract from her at all is this idea that you're looking at it from a biological place. What is embodiment? It's the expansion of the nervous system. So our nervous system, when we are triggered, we're on edge of our nervous. That's the maximum input it can take in that thing without causing discomfort. And so through the healing work, what we're actually doing is we're expanding the ability, the capacity, the electrical capacitance of this nervous system biologically. And what that means is that our higher self that she was referring to can take presence more and more, like it can incarnate more. We don't incarnate yes or no. We're incarnating in a percentage, in an amount of energy. So as we expand the nervous system, what we're really doing through the healing work is we're embodying. We're integrating all of the wisdom of the past, and we're expanding the nervous system to handle more. And so our higher self can actually incarnate. So for me, what I'm teaching very esoterically right now is that as you heal, you're bringing your highest vibration into you deeper and deeper, which gives you a sense of confidence, a sense of connection, a sense of worth, a sense of all this value that you bring. And you're just walking the path of oneness with life.
Wow. Thank you so much, you guys. This was a beautiful, inspiring episode. I've learned so much, and I know my listeners are going to eat this up, and I can't wait for your book to come out. So before we end this, I have an outro. Britton and Carolee's story is a bold redefinition of love, union, and spirituality outside of religious confines. If you felt stirred, curious, or cracked open by anything shared today, I highly recommend you visit themagicalstoryofus.com and join their newsletter. Their upcoming book, Ritual Shadow Work, will walk you through the deeper healing journey. Whether you're single or partnered, the work is tender, the work is real, and as we've seen today, it can be magical. So thank you both for joining me. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I hope you did too.
Yes, thanks. It's been great. And by the way, you can now be my new marketing person. That was a great outro.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Catch you next time.
See ya.